next topic that I want to talk about is rodent, mouse, or rat exclusion. I have 3 different kinds of exclusion material that you can use. And I'll start off with the copper mesh. This is probably one of the easier things to use. Whenever I do a quarterly service, I always keep a bundle of it in my pocket, something right here, so that I can, whenever I need to, or whenever I find an entry point, I can block that right then and there without having to go back to the truck and grab it. It's really easy to tear. You don't need any scissors with that. It just comes right off. You can bundle it up, pack it in there really tight, and make sure that it's sealed up very well. One of the challenges that you do have with this is if it's not packed in there tight, mice and some rodents can push through that. And so you've got to make sure that it's packed in there really well, or else you might end up going back to redo the job you did the first time. So pretty straightforward, pretty easy to use. The second one is window screening. I have to get the aluminum kind. You have to have the aluminum kind, or else if it's plastic or any fiberglass, they'll chew right through that. They'll get right through it. So with aluminum, I choose the black because it tends to be a little bit less visible other than the silver or the gray color. And so this is a little bit harder to use. You have to use your cutters. That's why you have these here. And so you just cut out the size that you need. You bundle it up similar to what you would do with the copper mesh, and you'll stick that in there. I'm hoping that we can find an entry point around this home that we can use to show you how I would do that, so that in the end it's tight, it's going to stay there for a long time, and it looks good, right? The final one, and this is the really aggressive approach, is a 1/4 inch galvanized screening. You have to use cutters for this. Obviously it's pretty tough to cut, pretty tough to even use. This is going to be for the bigger holes around the outside of the home that you'll eventually communicate to the customer saying, hey, you've got a pretty big hole in the foundation wall or on the exterior of your home. Suggest you hire a contractor or a handyman to actually fill it up and make it look good. But at least right now you have a temporary fix. And hopefully I'll be able to show you how to use one of these as well, again, to make it look good and stay in place for a period of time, hopefully 6 to 12 months. All right, team. So what we've got here is we're doing a mouse exclusion or mouse entry point inspection. We want to find how they're getting in. One of the challenges that we have with mice is that they're really good at squeezing into small cracks and crevices. All it takes for a mouse is 1/4 of an inch. And they have those teeth that never stop growing, and so they'll chew their way in if it's not quite big enough for them. So some of the main areas you're going to find some rodent activity are going to be these weak spots in a foundation wall. So this is in the basement. I already know this from an inspection on the inside, but in the basement there's an oil tank, and these are the valves that go to that. So what they've done is they've drilled a hole in the sill plate to allow these pipes to come through. And so many times you'll find that around something like this is an opening where mice can get in. It's also close to the ground, and mice are capable climbers. They're really good at what they do. And so a porous foundation wall like this is pretty easy for them to climb. I've seen them climb up and down brick walls before. And so this is going to be pretty easy. So in the event that there was a hole here, they would climb up this brick wall and they'd squeeze in there pretty easily. And this is kind of a sheltered area. Pests aren't going to find, or at least their predators aren't going to find them very well. And so looking for places like this is going to be key. A common place where we miss rodent entry points is a storm door. Right? So when you do your inspection, you're going to check underneath the siding, fill along here with a stone foundation wall like this. You'll find that it's not quite sealed up along that sill plate. So you want to run your fingers underneath here, make sure that it's tight, make sure that it's snug along these edges here. Well, one of the things that people miss on these doors pretty often is that down here at the bottom, many times there's an opening with where these things will close. And mice will find their way in there, and if they don't have a good door down into the basement, they'll find their way around that. So in the event that you have one and you know somebody's having a challenge with mice, this is one of those places that you should spend a lot of your time inspecting and verifying. When you're doing your inspection, there's a couple of things that you'll want to look at. One of those will be your sebum stain. It's the oils from their fur. And so what they'll do is they'll memorize their locations and how they get in and out of a house, mostly for safety things. They'll be able to know how to get away if something tries to get them. And so they'll leave behind an oil stain or a slick. It's dark in color, sometimes black, where they've spent a lot of their time traveling. So you'll look for something like that. Droppings is a big one. You'll always find droppings in places where they're going to be running back and forth pretty often. So when you go down underneath here, you'll be able to find some droppings and say, yes, mice have come in this far. I know that they're here. Let's do some rodent control, exclusion work, some baiting. Just over here is another location where mice might be able to find their way in. So this is the electrical conduit that comes into here, into the house. So just on the inside of the wall here is the electrical panel. And so all this is full of wires. Again, it's another place where they've chewed, or not chewed, but drilled an opening for these wires to go through. And so if you feel around that, you can generally identify if there's an opening there. Luckily for this home, it is sealed up pretty tight. Again, you're looking for 1/4 of an inch or bigger. So for this one, we're okay. But yeah, that's some of the main places you'll want to look for mouse exclusion. There's another one around the front. Let's go look at that one. All right, so I found a perfect opportunity to find, to at least do some exclusion for some mice on this property. One of a good rule of thumb to keep in mind is that with mice, if you're not sure if it could be an opening, block it anyway. So I don't know what's behind this piece of wood. I'm not sure if there's openings up higher or just around here, but what I do know, just with feeling with my fingers, is that this is wide open. I can actually feel cool air coming from underneath here. You've got about 3 or 4 inches here. It's pretty wide open, and knowing mice can climb pretty well, there's a chance that this might be an entry point for mice. And so when you're doing your inspection around the outside of somebody's home, don't rule anything out. Always check the areas that you think they might be, so that we don't have to go back out for a service call, or we've got a customer that's frustrated because we just can't seem to figure it out. So I pre-cut this piece here. I want to show you how I'm going to fold this to kind of jam it up in here. It doesn't have to be pretty. I just don't want it dangling out or anything like that, but I'm also doing a good job, at least as far as sealing it. So in this case, I cut it out just a little bit bigger than you think that I would need, just because I know that I'm going to have to poke it up in there, and I don't want to fill this whole thing. I just wanted to be enough to at least block this layer here. So one of my favorite things to do is to take this and just roll it up kind of at an angle and get you pretty close to the right size. And if you just take this end and fold it in to about the size that you need it, it's a little bit bigger, you have a good little square that you can poke in there pretty well. And then at the end of the surface, this will be the bottom thing that kind of fills the void. So we'll see how this works. We'll see if we can get it to go in there pretty well. So all I'm doing is just going to push it around these edges here, up in the corners. Try not to let it be visible. And the more that I push it up there, the harder and tighter it gets. I wish you guys could feel it, because you can see that there's really not an opening there. There is one just a little bit right here. So I'm just gonna poke that up in there like that. Here we go. There you go. So I'm checking all the edges, just making sure that as it folds, there wasn't an area where it was folded that they can get past. And I don't feel one. So at least I made an attempt here. If it's not an entry point, no harm done. If it is, great. The customer will be happy. They'll have less mice getting into their home. As you come out for a quarterly service, you'll want to check areas like this just to make sure that it's still intact. So customer can't see it. The technician who comes out after you will feel up there and say, oh, hey, look, somebody already excluded this. Let's just double check it. Let's make sure that we don't have any openings in a place or a new one. And say, all right, well, that one feels good. Let's continue on. It takes a little bit of time, but it's well worth it in the long run. During the summertime, not a lot of people have a battle with mice, but in the wintertime, absolutely, lots of people do. And if we can stop their mice altogether from the exterior, it's a way better way to do pest control. We're still at that same doorway. Just this time it's on the right side of the door. I just was identifying that there's an opening here on this side. I checked to see if there's spider webs going through it, to see if there's any If there's spider webs over, generally it's a good sign that there hasn't been any activity in that opening. This one was wide open. I'm going to just make sure there's no doubt that might be an opportunity for mice to get in. I'm just going to block it with some copper mesh. It's a smaller hole. It's going to be easy. It's not going to take very much. So I'm just going to take this. I'm going to bundle it up a little bit. You can make it look nice if you want to. At least at the end, you will have to. I'm just going to take it, poke it down in there, make sure that it's in there nice and tight. That's not going to move anywhere. Make sure it's secure. I think for this one, I'm going to need a little bit more, just to make sure we got a good block in here. I see a lot of exclusion jobs that look similar to this, and I appreciate the effort, but if I was a customer to look at that, I think there's things that we can do more. So pushing that so that it's tucked in there a little bit, then taking your scissors and just trimming this up a little bit always helps things look a little bit better, or pushing it back in their way that they can't see it very well. Ultimately, our appearance is pretty important. That's why we wear the clothes we wear and we drive the trucks that we drive. We want to make sure that everything looks good, and including our exclusion jobs, because that's how people will see the value of our service. So make sure that when you get done doing an exclusion job, you take a look at that and you say, does that look good? Is that something that's kind of an eyesore, or is that acceptable? And generally, if you like it and you'd allow that around your home, you're probably in the clear there. So pretty simple, pretty easy to use. Don't hesitate to use it. The more the merrier, I think, when it comes to exclusion, especially in the fall and the winter time. When you're at an initial service, it's really important to find these mouse entry points on the first try. And with any pest, it's really ultimately the goal is to get rid of them as quickly as you can so that customers see the value in that. So on an initial service, you'll spend a little bit more time doing an inspection and doing exclusion, naturally. So when you come over to a home like this, you'll have to check along a lot of the siding just to make sure whether or not that's an opening or a potential opening. So weak spots, again, stone foundation wall, filling up underneath there. You can feel the sill plate from where I'm at. There are some gaps here. I can fit all 4 of my fingers into a gap just right here. So I'm going to keep going. There's another one. Visited by a bee here. He doesn't like me. So it's pretty, it's not very quality as far as the foundation wall goes. So I think you'll probably run into a scenario where you could spend hours and hours excluding possible entry points, and you're probably still not going to get them all. But what's important to feel is these outside corners. These are places where in the home there might be a weak spot or a place where mice can find their way in because when they constructed the home it wasn't sealed up as tight as it could be. Again, most of the time it's probably not going to be a place, but it's that one place or that one time that we're going to have to go out over and over and over again and never find the problem, that I'd rather just address it now than frustrate a customer and then go out multiple times. I'd rather just rule it out from the very beginning. So inside corners like this, feeling along the stone here, this is cut out for that stone. Stick your fingers up there. A lot of people probably wouldn't be very comfortable doing this with bare hands, so I suggest you get your gloves on as long as you're doing a good job feeling along it. This area is actually pretty nice. This is an addition with the cinder block. And so as I'm feeling this, I can see up underneath here that it's sealed up pretty well on top of that cinder block. So I feel pretty safe saying that along this area, at least until this corner, it's pretty secure for mice. I'm just going to feel this, see if there's any opening here. And it feels good over here. So what you would do is you just do that around the whole property, around the whole exterior of the house. Checking again locations like this, checking for mouse entry points, droppings, sebum stains. Generally you'll find some evidence of them, at least pointing you to the direction of where the entry point is. Beyond that, you'll go inside and you'll find their droppings, and you'll backtrack from the number of droppings that you see to a more significant area where there's a lot more droppings. That's generally going to point you to the smoking gun, is what I call it, as to where the mice are getting in. But as far as this home goes, What I would do as far as communication to the customer is I would explain to them that with a foundation wall like this, finding all the entry points is like finding a needle in a haystack. And maybe because we don't have the time to spend out there or the expertise, it might be valuable just to have somebody who knows what they're doing, like somebody who does cement work or a handyman come in and just seal that back up again. It's a price point for them, but at least they understand and they know that it's important for them, if they want good control of their mice, to have somebody come out here and properly seal up the openings that we just can't take care of. So as far as questions about that, speak with your general manager, the main guy on your branch, and we'll make sure that they'll give you the right direction that you need. Something that's a little bit uncommon, but it happens on occasion. I know that for myself, I've gone out to multiple of these jobs, a number of these jobs where we just can't seem to get control of the mouse population. And there's not a lot of activity in the basement, which would be normal, but there's a lot of activity in the attic. And so one of those things, at least what I've been coming to learn, and I hope that you'll look outside the box on things like this, or at least expand your area of search, would be to watch for trees and overhanging branches, twigs or branches that come in contact with the roof. An example would be something similar to this tree. Mice can climb up the branches of this tree and then drop off onto the roof. Not to say that they'll find an opening up there, but with the experience that I have in wildlife, squirrels and raccoons, other animals will generally find openings to get into homes. And on the roof, as long as the water is not leaking in, there's openings up there as well. And so in the event that you're having a challenge with finding where the mice are getting in, and it just doesn't seem to make sense where they're starting off, look around the top of the roof, see if there's any branches that get in contact with it. I have a couple pictures that I'll include in this that show an area in the roof where they were walking right across, right into the gutter, a weak spot in the wood, and they were finding their way in right there. And once I solved that and I blocked that opening, mouse problem went away, even though we fought it for a year, right? So keep in mind that just because mice spend most of the time around the foundation, it doesn't mean that they can't climb a tree and get in from the roof line.